Hello and welcome to the Garden of the Black Roses. This is fanfiction. This is the next chapters of my Ragnarok Online story, my guild story. Yeah. Now, just to add, at the time of recording this, it is Australia Day in Australia. If you can't tell, I am Australian. My Aussie accent probably flicks between Aussie, Filipino, and American. I don't know where the American came from, but it does pop out every now and then. But yeah, it is January 26th. I had to double check. I was about to say 25th. January 26th. It's Australia Day. So, it's probably gonna be like February by the time this audio comes out, but hey, whatever. Alright. Chapter 35. Lack sat in bed listening carefully to the conversation going on around him. Chibi sat perched at the end of his bed, her paw rubbing her left ear from time to time. Tadakono, Syao, and Phenomenon sat on the next bed. They each relayed their account of what Syao had fondly called the Hell Invasion. Sakashi is yet to move Contra from the cells below, Lack said softly, his strength still low. Chibi walked up the bed until she stood in his lap. How long are you staying a cat? Until my spiritual power is back up again, she mewed in reply. Unlike you getting physically tired, I lose strength when I supply you with my own power. So I'm a cat until further notice. That doesn't help, Lack replied. Knowing his own situation didn't help things either. According to Saria, Contra will break through the inner cell in less than 6 hours. That doesn't give us much time to recover. Chibi leapt off him and curled up at his side and closed her eyes. I need to know our capabilities in case Kashi isn't able to move him before the 6 hours is up. Face it, Lack, Phenomenon said with a sigh. We're going to need help from the other guilds on this. He laid back and looked at the ceiling. Our guild is too physically and magically tired from the combined battle of Hell and Contra. It will take a while for everyone to recover. He raised his right hand up to look at the scars that snaked down his arm like flames. For most, it will take over 6 hours to recover fully. Within the 6-hour time frame, Tadakono added, touching his Fight Club tattoo that had a newly healed scar running through the middle of it. You'll only have us, Bright Eyes, Illusions, and Mina. You'll be just over half strength, by my guess, and Chibi will be nowhere near half. He glanced at Chibi for confirmation on that piece of information. Noticing she was asleep, he continued, That's not nearly enough guild strength to keep Contra at bay if he breaks through. What about the outer cell? Syao asked, coming out of deep thought. He'd have to break through that to get into the guild, so shouldn't we have more than 6 hours? The combined cells gave us a maximum of 24 hours tops, Lack explained, absently patting Chibi. The time he fell through to the time Saria came and told me, almost 18 hours had passed. To be precise, the moment Saria told me, Contra had already broken through to the outer cell. The three looked at Lack in shock at this news. There's no way to recontain him? Syao asked, shaking slightly. Lack shook his head. Itami can't do anything? She can't because the resources to morph the building more aren't here, Lack replied with a sigh. It's going to take a long time to gather the resources to allow her to morph the building again. She used the emergency supplies when she did it the first time, so unless Chibi can become human again before the 6 hours is up, we have to think of another plan. Why Chibi? Phenomenon asked quietly. She's alchemist class, not blacksmith class. How could she be able to help in terms of raw materials? Because of the secret to turn stone into gold, Ethan said, stepping into the room. Giving a small wave, he added, Kashi released me from guarding the Yggdrasil gate, on the condition I say ethereal. I guess it's like I'm on bail for good behavior. Noticing Phenomenon's confused expression, he continued, Lack is willing to bear Kashi's wrath, since Chibi herself is already bound, and anything more could take her away from here completely. So that Chibi can create the gold needed to buy a large amount of raw materials that can allow Itami to morph the building as many times as needed. He looked at Lack with a frown. The guild funds aren't high this month, I suppose? They're incredibly low, Lack replied, resting his head on one hand. From rebuilding the guild, to the money lost while my copy was here, to the usual renewing and repairing of training materials, there just isn't enough to continuously buy materials for Itami to morph the building. Something that just occurred to me. Tadakono leaned back so he could see everyone. Contra was with Loki. We defeated Loki. Now he was with Hell. We defeated Hell, but he's still here. He's like a cockroach, isn't he? Chibi's voice floated from what looked like a little black ball at Lack's side. Cockroaches always find a way to survive. Lack pet her gently. She shivered under his touch. Aside from Loki and Hell, I don't think any more of Loki's family will attack us. Nilg isn't the type to leave his post at Yggdrasil. There is a possibility that Fenrir might act on his own accord, but like a big dog, he won't do much without his father's support. Unlike a cockroach, though, Syao replied dryly, he can easily squash all of us without breaking a sweat. For a brief second, he thought he saw both Chibi and Lack stiffen at his words. Taking that possibly imagined hint, he added, It's true, isn't it? Lack didn't answer. Phenomenon got up and gave him a little shake. Tadakono, realizing what was happening, got up and eased Lack back down into lying position. He's probably still tired and shut down again like he did earlier. El did warn us when we came in that he might. Sauron and Phenomenon nodded. The three left Lack's side, discussing strategies amongst themselves. A piece of Tadakono's mind stayed on Chibi and Lack. It's not like Chibi to draw him inwards in the middle of a conversation. I hope nothing is seriously wrong. Lack sat with Chibi in human form, leaning against his back. You drew me in, he said tiredly, and now you say you can't get me out? It wasn't me, Chibi replied, her voice sounding equally tired. I was drawn here, the same as you. The only other person who can do that to us, aside from ourselves, is Io. But she hasn't appeared since we got here, so I have no idea what is going on. So there's no way this can be a malicious attempt of disabling us by one of Loki's family? Lack was ready to believe in anything in his tired state. Unless Ia sold her power, Chibi replied. Everything in her senses pointed towards something in the distance. I think we have to go to her. She's somewhere in your consciousness. She got up and turned to help Lack up. Why she's there and how she got there, I have no idea. He's been asleep for an awfully long time, Phenomenon said with a sigh to Sharon. His eyes darted from Lack to L, and Tadakono not far off. Tada's been acting strange too. You think so too? Sharon confirmed quietly. I have a feeling Tada knows more about this situation than we do. They nodded to each other and crept slowly towards Tadakono and L. Ia says not to worry, but it honestly looks like he's a living dead, Tadakono cried, his hands clutching his cape tightly. Even though I know about their link, it's still not helping anyone else if Lack looks like he's gonna die on us. And you being afraid that he is actually on the verge of death isn't your true concern? Elle's voice curled around Tadakono like a serpent. Honestly, if Ia says he's alright, then he's alright. If you have to stress over anyone dying, then stress over Chibi. Goodness knows how long she's going to be a cat for. Chibi knows how to survive as a cat. Tadakono's voice was dry. However, the guild doesn't know how to survive as a whole without Lack. Earl placed his hands on Tadakono's shoulders. You have nothing to worry about then. It wasn't Chibi who drew them into their link, it was Ia. So unless she turned evil, which isn't possible without everyone under her care becoming evil also, she won't keep them long. Standing up and stepping out from the nearby bed, Phenomenon and Sharon took a hold of each of Tadakono's arms. You're going to need to explain everything. Phenomenon's voice was dark and cold. We just heard some very interesting news. How far are we going, Chibi? Lack asked. He now blindly followed her, with her hand in his as a guide. I'm starting to sense Ia as well, but I don't see her. Just there. He looked up to where she was pointing. A bright doorway shone in the distance. Just through there. She smiled and pulled him along. Don't ask me where it goes. I just know it leads to Ia. Chapter 36. With a silent apology to Lack and Chibi, Tadakono gestured lightly towards their bed. Pulling back the blanket, he revealed Chibi's tail wrapped around Lack's wrist. Phenomenon and Sharon looked at each other, and with a shrug, looked back at Tadakono questioningly. Lack and Chibi have a connection that allows them to speak to each other through their power, Tadakono replied to their looks. Within Lack's center of power, they can communicate like we are now. Only Chibi can pull them into that though. Lack, on the other hand, can use Chibi's power as a physical strength. That's why he's been carrying Chibi as a cat on his shoulder, rather than have her support him as a creator. So basically, Sharon summarized, perching himself back onto the bed next to Lack's. Chibi has pulled Lack into his center of power to talk to him? That's what I assume, Tadakono said with a nod. But it's not like Chibi to pull him in halfway through a conversation. Lack tapped his fingers against the small glass mosaic table. Chibi sat near him, glancing across the table, then to Ia, and then back across the table. Opposite Lack and Chibi sat the three mediators, Kashi and Novus. "Why is this all happening in my head?" Lack asked in a low voice to Chibi. She could tell he was irritated. More to the point, since when was there a garden in my head? "We aren't in your head anymore," Chibi replied quietly. "We passed into the part of Yggdrasil that connects the dreams of everyone in Rune Magard and beyond." She looked pointedly at Ia before adding, "It is the safest place, next to being in your head, where we can gather to talk without being spied on." Ia cleared her throat. "I've been asked to facilitate this meeting between Kashi and Lack over the topic of Contra being beneath Fight Club headquarters." Lack glanced at Kashi, his eyes boring imaginary holes into him. "Couldn't you have picked a better time to hold this meeting? I was holding a meeting of my own before we were rudely removed." "You're just complaining for the sake of complaining," Shadow standing suddenly snapped at him. Black Rose and Ballas pulled her back into a chair roughly. "Patience, Shadow," Black Rose said softly, as Shadow smacked their hands away. "Lack is Lack, after all." Lack frowned at this comment. "True," Ballas added, pointing his finger at Lack and Chibi. "That beside, they are always in some meeting, so it's unavoidable. It's what humans do." Lack felt Chibi elbow him. Looking down at her, he noticed she was drawing a few bombs and acids from her pouch. She placed them on the table with a very deliberate thump. Novus narrowed his eyes at her in response. Ia sighed and slammed her hands on the table. "Enough!" Her voice pierced through all present like a bullet. "I didn't bring you here to attack each other. The longer you argue, the less time we have to work out what to do." "It's simple," Kashi said quietly. "There's no way we can bind Contra, so all we can do is kill him." Chibi stiffened at his words. Kashi gave her a faint smile and continued, "I don't propose Fight Club be the only ones to kill him. What I plan is to get the guilds who have been involved in this mess until now to aid us." He indicated to all the hidden gods. "In killing Contra, I can't promise that no one will die. However, I hope that with the sheer number of people, we can overwhelm Contra." Chibi slammed her fists against the table and stood. "I refuse to believe that killing Contra is the only solution." Ia gently brushed Chibi's cheek. Her eyes darkened and she fell back into her seat, Lack catching her head before it hit the table. "What did you do?" Lack asked, arranging Chibi to look like she was sleeping. Ia blinked but didn't reply. Lack nodded, understanding her. Understanding her silent response, and leaned back in his chair. Looking up at Kashi, he added, "While I agree with Chibi that it can't be the only solution, killing him is the most foolproof." Ia coughed lightly. "Chibi is merely acting that way because of what she's seen." She spoke to no one in particular. Sighing, she added, "I don't blame her for snapping." Lack sighed and closed his eyes. "You sure you want to kill Contra? From what Chibi has told me, it's going to be a very bloody battle." Resting his fingers against each other, he frowned. Will you even have enough power? That's why I'm going to buy time by granting Fight Club the materials it needs to keep Contra in that prison until everyone is... Kashi glanced at Chibi, then sighed. Almost everyone is at 100%. Don't worry about Chibi, Io replied before Lack could speak. I'll make sure she's at 100% when the time comes. She stroked Chibi's hair gently. Lack rested his head against the palm of his hand, looking satisfied. The last thing he wanted was to have his guildsmen crushed unprepared. Then Fight Club will cooperate with the hidden gods. Standing, he offered his hand to Kashi. Kashi took his hand and shook it strongly. And hopefully this will end all of the troubles within Rune Midgard. Chapter 37. You agreed to what? Chibi's voice echoed through the infirmary. Her tail smacked Lack hard on the arm. You basically sentenced the whole guild to death. Do you realize that? Everyone's gonna die. She sank her claws into his right thigh and arched her back. What possessed you to even consider such a plan without consulting the guild for their opinion? Ever thought they might not want to die? Lack picked her up and held her at arm's length away from him to avoid getting clawed in the chest next. That's why I'm not going to order the guild to fight. I'm going to tell them the full situation and let them decide what they want to do. Chibi stopped waving her paws around and stared at him. Against his better judgment, he brought her close to his face until their noses almost touched. But I do feel that they will decide to fight him regardless of whether I order it or not. I thought I heard Chibi's voice, Sharon interrupted as he walked in with Phenomenon and Tadakono. It's not possible for Lack to agree to anything if he's been asleep since our little meeting. Chibi's eyes widened, and all in the room felt fairly certain she was blushing as well, despite the fact that all they could see was black fur. Lack set her down on his lap and looked up at them with the most annoyed expression they had ever seen. He glanced at Tadakono and sighed. Let the guild know there's a meeting in a few hours, he said softly. In the sealed meeting hall, in the old dungeon wing. What I am going to tell everyone is top secret. Anyone not there on time will be locked out. He looked up at the three, his eyes crystal clear. I want absolutely everyone there, if possible. Chibi sat on the floor under her own chair that stood next to Lack's chair. As everyone walked in, she would dip a claw into the dish of ink and tick off their names. Her ears pricked up to the sound of footsteps ascending the stairs at the end of the stage. Tadakono, Sharon, and Phenomenon helped Lack walk up the stairs and towards the chair. After Lack was seated, they arranged themselves on their own chairs in a half-moon near his. Lack leaned over and looked at Chibi's list. Everyone here? He whispered. She twitched her ears, then nodded in reply. Are you able to turn back to being human? For a short time, she replied, ticking off a few more names. I'll turn back when you get to that part. Lack nodded and straightened once more to watch everyone take their places. He smiled as Ethan, Elle, Saria, and Itami slipped into the room as well. Chibi moved from under her chair and looked up at him. Everyone's here now. Good. Lack focused his power into the old system. Doors and windows alike slammed, sealing everyone into darkness. Mage classes within the crowd summoned fireballs to light the room. Tadakono lit the stage with his own summoned flames. It's time I tell you all what has been happening since the beginning of Fight Club itself. Everything that led up to this point in time. Lack could tell that everyone's attentions were partially on Chibi's empty chair. Chibi is in the room. When I get to that, I will explain. But for now, attention on me, please. Shortly after Fight Club was created, the gods decided the world needed to be mediated by those who were currently living in the world as it was. They called upon a man called Kashi to be the founder and ruler of the hidden gods. They imbued him with power to allow him to perform his duties without too much trouble. Kashi recruited Novus and Palador to aid him, and later on recruited Blackrose, Shadow, and Balos. We, along with the other guilds of the world, didn't understand who or what the hidden gods were, and a war broke out. During this war, many of our guild fell. A few still remain to aid us to this day. He nodded his head towards El, Saria, and Itami. It was during the war that Chibi and Ethan made a deal. Ethan had found a secret that would strengthen someone physically in exchange for their life. Chibi gave Ethan the secret of creating gold from stone as an equal trade for the secret. Kashi found out and punished both. Ethan became the guard to the entrance of Yggdrasil in Niflheim, and Chibi stood and moved into the firelight near Lack's side. Changing back to her normal self, she sat down carefully into her chair. Chibi became a cat. After this, we discovered the true intentions of Kashi and the hidden gods. We've been working with them until now on various issues. Lack paused, letting everyone digest the first guild secret before continuing. When I broke the guild the last time, and everyone went their separate ways, Chibi had married Mike. While she was in Velvet Touch of Inishi, she decided that there was an ancient tool that she needed in order to protect those close to her. She went on a quest to obtain Azoth, and succeeded. Ea became her patron, and gave her the ability to see short distances into the future. Chibi later altered Azoth to enable it to be also used by myself and Mike. In so doing this, she tore her already broken spiritual power. Ea came to me and asked me if I would be her anchor to the human world. I agreed, and we became siblings because of the link forged between us. Chibi became upset that Ea had asked me without asking her permission first, and asked that the deal and knowledge of the link be sealed within me. Instead, Chibi and I developed a close relationship that siblings have without realizing it, or without realizing why. While we were in Ice Cave, Chibi reminded me, and since I have been able to use the link between us. I decided that it was time I recreated the guild. Fight Club returned, and Chibi came back to her original position as my second. Mike became unhappy with this, and caused trouble not just for Chibi, but also myself. I dealt with it, and everything went back to being normal again, until the trouble with Contra started. Everyone knows about the battle in the foyer with him the first time, so no need to go into detail. Chibi tugged at Lak's shirt. He paused and looked at her. Seeing how pale she was, he nodded, and waited until she turned back into a cat before continuing. After this, I learned that Contra had received Loki's medallion. Most of what happened this past year with the doppelgangers, Hell, and Contra, everyone knows well. However, this part I tell you now is what you all need to think on. The hidden gods and I have determined the only way to rid our world of Contra once and for all is to kill him. Kashi has granted Fight Club the resources to keep Contra sealed until our guild, as well as Velvet Touch of Inishi, Seven Deadly Sins, Brotherhood, Nothing, and Under the Shadows guilds are at their best fighting capabilities before attempting to kill Contra. I won't deny that a lot of people will fall at Contra's hand. Therefore, I won't force anyone who doesn't want to fight. All I ask is that you leave to one of the outer worlds before the battle with Contra starts. Our guild HQ won't be a safe place to stay once it starts. Lak paused and shut his eyes. The windows and doors creaked as they opened slightly. I won't stop you, nor will I kick you out of the guild. This is one fight I won't insist on everyone fighting in. And that's it. There is 2 more chapters that I'll be recording, and they are gonna be in the next video. But yeah, if you really want to hear what happens next, like and comment and subscribe to get notified. Also in the description there is a link to the written version that's on my website, so if you really want to read it quickly, you can go there. But yeah, that's it. And as always, let your imagination grow wild. Bye for now.